I work with two girls who were Islamic downstairs, Fatima and Minera, and they were, I think I had something to go on.
Good morning, everybody. Just signing on for the online stream, and also apologizing if you tried to watch last night. We had basically a Zoom Bible study last night, which I tried to stream, but my batteries in my microphone were dead. So we had another session of you watching us talk without being able to hear us talk. So I apologize again for that.
Oh, no.
Yes, oh no is right. And we had two people that were trying to watch it live. So I'm apologizing, and I'm hoping that today I have two microphones and two new batteries, and so I'm hoping that the stream that we did last night was a wonderful visual experience, but the sound was not at all.
Well, it did come in.
The battery in this mic went dead. But it went dead like 5 minutes into the study, so I don't know. Anyway, Colette is here on the Zoom, and
That's great.
I think there are still two other, I don't know, Barbara coming today? I think she is. She said,
She said she would come, but she had to leave early.
oh, okay.
But it sounded like she was going to.
That's what I heard Sunday, too.
Right.
She had-
Well, I continue to be, inspired, even if you guys become like the primary talkers. That's okay, because people watch. People do watch. They watch this, and Colette certainly knows how to throw her 2 cents in. So
We love that, Colette. Colette, have you seen?
Well, I am primarily here for learning because I've never had the opportunity to be in a Bible class, anything like this. And,
Me
well,
either.
not even, because I was mostly working 2 jobs all the time. So I am just a sponge. So I just love it.
well, you know how I feel is I went to graduate school for 3 years. I took courses in the Bible and all that, and then I come out and I feel like if you're a sponge, I feel like, I don't know, a tank of water, because you get filled with all this information and all this training, and then truthfully, in most congregations, there's very little outlet for it. I mean, preaching is one thing, but preaching is not like this. Preaching is a different task than this. And so sharing, the opportunity to share, what I've learned, 25 years ago. And I've always had these Bible studies because it's important to me. This is information that was given to me, not for me to keep, but for me to also engage further. And it's not a bunch of answers. In some ways, it's a bunch of the right questions, so that we can live our lives, I think, more faithfully in terms of what we're called to. So anyway, I would like to begin today with a word of prayer. And I see Barbara is on her way in, so maybe we'll wait just a few minutes longer.
Can you get out through the meeting?
I will keep.
Colette, have you seen Bonnie?
Yes, well, no, I haven't seen her,
Oh,
but occasionally we will call each other.
Good.
I don't know if I should say this or not, but she told me that because Lou convinced her that the Bible was written by men, she's not so much about the Bible anymore.
Well,
Okay, I get it. All right. All right, Colette, yeah.
sorry for that cord laying in front of you.
Maybe I should just send her a card, which I do every now and then, say, hey, Bonnie, we miss you. Good boy, She had other input that was very interesting to me.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's very much into metaphysical things now.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
All right.
Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning, Barbara. I would like to begin today with prayer. In particular, a prayer to support Elaine Griswold in her journeys in the school in Uganda, and just pray for her today. You know, she's sending back emails and communications, but there's times of difficult transitions going on. COVID wrecked their students' ability to accomplish what they needed to accomplish for passing government exams. And, you know, it's nothing different than what teachers are facing here, but they're also extremely short of food. And that creates another big challenge. So let's pray for her and for the Mustard Seed Academy. Dear God, the miles are not miles to you. They are but small spaces between us that you connect and bridge for us to be one with each other as we are one with you. So we pray that that connection might be felt for Elaine and for the students of Mustard Seed, for the families that are trying to overcome drought and absence of opportunity to buy food. And for the students, we pray especially that they would be able to find a place to be able to learn and to continue on the progress that they've been making. In particular, we pray for Elaine that you strengthen her, as she is such an important light of energy for the whole project. And so we just ask for your strength and your power in her and through her. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay. So I have my COVID hangover cough. Okay. So we are wading in to this book, this series of books, Isaiah. In the Bible that I read, which is the New Oxford Annotated Bible, it's the New Revised Translation. It still keeps this book called Isaiah in one book. But scholarship now, it's pretty clear from the changes in comments and regionalisms that exist in the text that you can tell that it actually is in three parts. And so we're, of course, in the beginning reading in 1st Isaiah. And Isaiah becomes, as we'll hear, a sort of mirror that the descendants of Abram and Sarah and those that trace their own existence to the liberation and salvation that happened in Egypt, tracing then through the promised land and the formation of the kingdom and the collapse of the kingdom, Isaiah becomes a truth teller. He looks at the experiences and makes an attempt to answer the question, what is happening to us? Why is this happening? What does God want from us? And what are we supposed to do now? Sometimes those words are welcomed and sometimes they are not. But Isaiah appears in all three places. Isaiah appears to be bold enough to speak truth to power, as they say. And so we get to experience some of what that was like for them. I think last time we were together, we read two, didn't we?
Yes.
Yes. So would somebody like to pick up the reading from 3?
Is that someone's name, Barbara? There you go.
No. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I need to leave at 11:15.
Right. I knew you were going to have to leave early. Okay. All right. So we'll know then that it's not something we said that made you get up and walk out. Okay.
Got it? You know from my back, my booster.
Oh, your booster
My
shot.
third booster. So we're at chapter 3. For now the sovereign, the Lord of hosts, is taking away from Jerusalem and from Judah support and staff, all support of bread and all support of water, warrior and soldier, judge and prophet, diviner and elder, captain of 50 and dignitary, counselor and skillful magician and expert enchanter. And I will make boys their princes, and babes shall rule over them. The people will be oppressed, everyone by another, and everyone by a neighbor. The youth will be insolent to the elder, and the base to the honorable. Someone will even seize a relative, a member of the clan, saying, "You have a cloak, you shall be our leader, and this heap of ruins shall be under your rule." But the other will cry out on that day, saying, "I will not be a healer. In my house there is neither bread nor cloak. You shall not make me leader of the people." For Jerusalem has stumbled and Judah has fallen, because their speech and their deeds are against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. The look on their faces bears witness against them. They proclaim their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Woe to them, for they have brought evil on themselves. Tell the innocent how fortunate they are, for they shall eat the fruit of their labors. Woe to the guilty, how unfortunate they are, for what their hands have done shall be done to them. My people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, your leaders mislead you and confuse the course of your paths. The Lord rises to argue his case. He stands to judge the peoples. The Lord enters into judgment with the elders and princes of his people. It is you who have devoured the vineyard. The spoil of the poor is in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people, by grinding the face of the poor, says the Lord God of hosts. The Lord said, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with outstretched necks, glancing wantonly with their eyes, mincing along as they go, tinkling with their feet, the Lord will inflict with scabs the heads of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will lay bare their secret parts. In that day the Lord will take away the finery of the anklets, the headbands, and the crescents, the pendants, the bracelets, and the scarves, the headdresses, the armlets, the sashes, the perfume boxes, and the amulets, the signet rings and nose rings, the festal robes, the mantles, the cloaks, and the handbags, the garments of gauze, the linen garments, the turbans, and the veils. Instead of perfume, there will be a stench, and instead of a sash, a rope, and instead of well-set hair, baldness, and instead of rich robe, a binding of sackcloth, instead of beauty, shame. Your men shall fall by the sword, and your warriors in battle. And her gates shall lament and mourn. Ravaged, she shall sit upon the ground. Okay.
Okay, anybody have anything, any response?
This sounds very much like the eschatology in Islam that says the end times has a whole bunch of signals, signs, and they're all just like this. The servants shall be the masters, and the masters shall be the servants.
Right.
And the young shall, be in a place of reverence, and the old shall be despised, and everything's topsy-turvy. And I like the reference here to the anklets, because that's specifically mentioned and to be frowned upon in Islam, calling attention to your feet. the women used to stamp their feet because they had these little bells around their ankles, and they would make, so there's an admonition about wearing anklets in Islam. And I'm just surprised to see it here too.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
So when there's a horse I can ride here. It's an old horse that I get on because of how the Bible gets translated. There's no question about it that this is describing, or at least in some ways, but Jeremiah is giving voice to the abomination of the Assyrians. What's going on in their world right now is they're being invaded by the Assyrians. And the Assyrians are ruthless in their deconstruction of the society. Now what Isaiah is saying is...
Are these the Assyrians or the Babylonians?
I think this is still the Assyrians. Yeah.
Because the Babylonians were first.
Are you sure?
Babylon took them away first.
Right.
And
then
Assyrian,
the Assyrians. I don't know which. One of them.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but the effect was the same for both.
Right.
So these invading armies come in, and Isaiah he's adding a theological interpretation to why this is happening. Now, the horse I ride on is, I go through this whenever you read the account of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And it's even named here, that Jeremiah even says, they look on their faces, bear witness against them. They proclaim their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Now, if you ask, and maybe this is wrong by now, but if you ask 100 people who participate in any of the Christian tradition, what is the sin of Sodom, they will tell you that it's sodomy, the word sodomy for anal sex between two men. And launching from there, a false assumption about what the sin of Sodom was, and then using that to then go on, if you have any question about what the brokenness and the upside downness of the city of Sodom was, Isaiah makes it clear. This is an abomination of the wealthy taking advantage of the poor. The sin of Sodom was economic sin. It was the abuse of outsiders and strangers and all the things that come along now, and you see not just one city, Sodom, being destroyed in Abram's time, but now you see the city of God. You see Jerusalem, the northern and the southern kingdom. They are being annihilated. They're being wiped out. And Jeremiah is saying the reason this can happen is because there is a weakness in the heart of who you are. And so the anklets represent, sometimes we skip right by and we go, oh, okay, let's not wear anklets. But it's so human of us to do that. To just say, oh, well, then the sin really is wearing it. No, it's not that. You have to read what it says. That the guilty are the guilty. My people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. The upside downness of what's happening is in response to the callousness of this community. It is you who have devoured the vineyard. Now, that might not mean anything to us, but the vineyards were devoured as the wealthy were claiming farmland. They were taking farmland that was needed for the people to survive, and they were building mansions on it. They were taking it for recreation, and they just took it away. They just, made it their own. In fact, if you remember when we read about David, David saw Bathsheba and decided he had to have her. So he went and took her. But when the prophet came to call David an account, he told him a story about a man who had 10 beautiful vineyards. And he looked over and saw one poor man had a vineyard. And so he went and he took the vineyard from the poor man. So in Kings, David's sin with Bathsheba is equated to this economic sin of those who have take from those who have not. And they use their position of power and might and strength, and also the assumption, God is with them, so they can't do anything wrong. And who suffers? The people suffer are the little people. It's just, that's the way it's always been.
Part of that sin is the fact that they don't care.
Right. That's
You know what, that's what I got. They don't care who sees it, how terrible it is, I mean, that's a sad thing, it's the way it's supposed to be. There's always supposed to be people better than others.
right. And in the paragraph there at 16, the Lord said, the daughters of Zion, and this isn't talking about women. It's just
Yeah.
talking about the people who are, the daughters of Zion are haughty. And they walk with outstretched necks, and I love this, glancing wantonly with their eyes, and they mince as they go along. Can you picture it?
Sure.
They go, ooh. I mean, I never want to walk this way again. And then to the anklets, they're tinkling with their feet.
Yeah.
That's the anklets. That's what you were describing.
They're being seductive.
Yeah, they
and
show off.
that's-
Yeah, they're using their anklets to ring their little bells and show off in the face of the poor who are already denigrated. They're already down and out.
So they're strutting their stuff.
They are.
Okay.
Now, this note here says it's the fate of the court ladies of Jerusalem.
Oh, say that again?
The fate of the court
Court
ladies.
ladies.
So I guess this is talking about women who are of a certain class, and as you said, they are,
Yeah, these are the dignitaries. This is the
Right.
ruling class. These are the people that, the poor have to come to adjudicate their claims of unfair treatment.
The peasantry probably doesn't have jewelry and has no time to be seductive. They're out working in the fields.
Fancy bracelets and veils
Yeah,
and
that's for
perfume?
those
Sure.
ladies in the palace.
I like the nose rings, sure.
Anyway,
And it's a description of a breakdown of the whole of society. But I keep coming back to is why? Jeremiah says it's because of economic injustice. It is because the people who have think they have because they're better, or that they have and they are indifferent to those who do not have. And Jeremiah says it's the end of the civilization. So in 18 it's called In the Day of the Lord. The Day of the Lord. And so we have a lot of Christians that got really enamored from the 1970s all the way through to, what's called end times.
yeah.
But I never hear in any of those Christian discussions about end times being based on economic injustice. It's always this idea that, you need to give your life to Jesus Christ and get fire insurance for the day of the Lord. Make sure that you're saved. But we remove the heart of the message that comes in standing on the tradition of the biblical witness. The day of the Lord will be the adjustment. It will be the right setting of the economic injustice. It will not be, did you give your life to Jesus Christ? I mean, you can think of it that way, as long as this image of giving your life to Jesus Christ and receiving salvation creates that turnaround in your life and gives you a heart for the poor.
Absolutely.
If it gives you a heart for the down and out, that's what it comes down to. And as I say, I don't hear that a lot. I hear fear. I hear the fear-mongering that says you need to be, God is going to come and get those who are enemies of God. Well, what does enemies of God mean? It ultimately does not mean the atheists. Because the Bible defines an atheist as someone who ignores the poor. That's what it says. You know, there's just so many passages that come rushing to my mind, when Jesus tells parables where, the sheep and the goats, and the goats say, well, how come you're punishing us? And basically, the landowner says, I don't even know you.
Well, Jesus was a Jew. He's following the Judaic idea of what justice means and how God looks at injustice. And it's all about treating those who have less with dignity and hospitality. It's not about taking an oath and then you're done and you're okay. And, how does, but there's a lot of things that can derail that, because it's much easier to say, I said that Jesus or whatever prophet you want to say is my savior, and so now I got my ticket, and I don't have to worry about all that other jazz. That's messy and hard and needs you to rethink your life every day instead of just once and done. So that probably is very appealing and gets very popular to just say, I'm okay.
And that's not new. Jesus on what the Sunday we call Palm Sunday, in the entrance into Jerusalem, the quote that I'm trying to think of is, I'm thinking of John the Baptist out in the wilderness, John the Baptizer. He's out there offering people a chance for the change of their lives and proclaiming God's love and justice. And he looks up, and who's coming but the religious leaders? The religious leaders, the people who are carrying out these injustices. Political and religious are combined in this experience. And they're coming out to John to say, what do you got for us? What do you have for us? Because if there's something good in there, then we should definitely be the ones who are getting this. So, and John looks at them, and I love his question to them is, who warned you to flee the coming disaster? Who warned you? Where did you get the word? Are you coming out here to me to be baptized so that you can then change the way you are living in relationship to hospitality and generosity and kindness and mercy? And I think John is very skeptical. He's saying, did you just think you were going to come out here and get another piece of the pie of the good life and reassure yourself that you really are, that God is not unhappy with you?
Because that's not what he was offering at all.
No, it's
and
not.
it's not what Jesus was offering.
No.
And I stand corrected. The Babylonians defeated the Assyrians at the Battle of Nineveh, but then the Assyrians came back and defeated Babylon. So the earliest part of Isaiah must have been written before the Babylonian
Right.
or the Assyrian.
I think it was.
This, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
My note says that this was perhaps during the critical period of Sennacherib's invasion and its aftermath. And Sennacherib was a Neo-Assyrian.
That's the
So
point
that's,
about them
it
coming
was the
back to
first,
power.
and then, because Cyrus was Assyrian too. They
Right.
had gone back into ascendancy. So it's getting really confusing, especially since this book is written
In the pieces.
before and after
Before and
exilic.
after what's going on. It's hard to know what
Exactly.
they're talking
Which
about.
part? Oh, sorry.
No, that's
No.
okay. That's why I didn't push it one way or the other, because I know,
Getting confusing.
yes, it gets confusing. And I think it's worth it to step back in a way, not always, but from the details, and just realize that this is the gong. The gong is ringing for the end of the empire. The empire meaning the Judean Empire and the northern and southern kingdom of Israel is collapsing. And it's not collapsing. Isaiah describes it as, it was invading armies, but he's talking about an interior collapse that is taking place. It's about youth rising up against their parents. We've had enough. This way of life is not working for us. And everything that makes a part of a stable society, Isaiah describes as crumbling to the ground. And I think that's why he pictures Sodom, because, there's this image I have from my childhood in the Sunday school. You'd see these people running to, their faces like full of terror, and the sky is literally raining fireballs down on them. And this is the day of the Lord. But what a tragic and terrible mistake we have made, especially for gay and lesbian people, to begin to associate the day of the Lord as a day of punishment for those who are already pushed out and pushed down. No, it's exactly the opposite. It is exactly the opposite. God, in negotiating with Abraham, God says, if you can find 10 families of justice in the city, I will save them. And Abraham comes out and says, I can't even find one. And there's a horrible scene, of men arriving, and which is really a terrible scene in Sodom of not just inhospitality, but of the need to devour immigrants, the need to devour them, to make them part of the meat of our prey.
That's that word again, hospitality. The Sodomites did not offer hospitality to the guests. That's like rule number one. I mean,
That's right.
Ibrahim was like, that's what you do. You let the men who are coming to visit you, that you might be afraid of because you don't know who they are, but you let them in and you share your meal, and they turn out to be angels.
Yes.
Hey, that's the blessing of being hospitable. This is the opposite. What are you doing? This is what your faith is based on, and like you said, I mean, we get dazzled by the stuff of this world, by wealth, by
The bling.
yeah.
I
and
always liked that
it's
too,
easy to
Debbie,
do.
when they said that, beware, because you might be entertaining angels.
That's it.
Like, I thought that was, I always liked that.
Yeah, I love that story
Yeah,
because
me
they don't
too.
know who they're entertaining.
Yes,
And Jesus says that too.
yeah.
So, and all of the prophets in Islam too. It's like, do the right thing, be hospitable, welcome the foreigner, welcome the stranger among you, and none of I shouldn't say, we are all the three Abrahamic faiths that I'm acquainted with, we are pretty poor at doing that. We don't do that very well. And here they're, the idea that things are upside down, yeah. The Bible is full of those stories. First shall be last.
Yes.
I mean,
It's-
and so how do you miss that message and make it all about something that I don't think it is?
Well, and it becomes, even as people read the message of the Old Testament, it's easy to make it about creed. It's like you have to obey the word of the Lord. Well, whenever I hear that now, obey the word of the Lord, I think of the word of the Lord to Abram and Sarah. Be a blessing to the families of the earth. I don't care how it works itself out in rituals and liturgies. I'm not an anti-liturgical person. In fact, I like liturgies. I used to be the principal of a Christian school, and I had a wonderful kindergarten teacher who said, one thing you learn about human beings is we are creatures of habit, and we need habits. We need them. They help us to know who we are, how we operate, and I always see religious ritual, even the most elaborate of it, is our giving ourselves permission to have habits that keeps us on the right road. But that is not the religion. It's not. It's just our habits.
That's the outward appearance.
Yeah, it's what.
The Bible says you can have, the phylacteries, you can have, your dreadlocks
Yep.
long. In Islam, you can have the heaviest, thickest veil. That doesn't say anything about your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with God. Does not say anything
No,
about it.
it
It just
doesn't.
says what you look like on the outside.
And I had a great experience of flashback this past Sunday because, I don't know, about 5 minutes after our gathering started, and through the back door, 2 women came in, and they were dressed in very traditional Muslim garb. They had head covers on, but it wasn't black. It was, it was. And,
I know, they're Turkish, so
Yeah,
it'll be
so,
probably
yeah.
beautiful patterns on the.
right, there
yeah,
were. And they walked in,
embroidery, yeah.
and they were seated, and it just did, it was wonderful for me, because it took me back to the early days of my ministry, when an experience like that happened. These were two Turkish women that were coming from a Turkish Society for Understanding and Better Relationships between Turkish Muslims anyway, and people in North America. And so they came in, they sat down. I didn't know who they were until the service was over. And then at the back, they started to introduce themselves. And I said, stop. I said, I'm a member of your organization. I was there on the ground floor. I met with the guy who used to be the coordinator of this.
Oh, yeah, I
And-
know his wife.
And then, so they pulled out a picture and they said, you mean him? I said, yes, him.
Yeah.
And what it sent me back to was a flashback to years and years ago. I was in a very big steeple, traditional Presbyterian church, and we had two men who came in and sat down in the sanctuary, and it was clear they were not Presbyterian men. And so I went back during the passing of the peace and introduced myself to them, and I said, my name's Pastor Lou, and the one guy said, my name is Ibrahim, and the other guy's name was Yeshua. And,
Joshua and Abraham.
and I said, so you mean Joshua and Abraham are here in our worship
That was
service
great.
today? I said, maybe one of you would like to preach, And I went back up after the passing of the peace, and I went to the podium, and I said, listen, I want to let you all know that Joshua and Abraham have come to worship with us today. And it just, I don't know, it's part of that whole sense of what I think the deeper spirituality for us as Christians. I don't know how other faith traditions get us there. My job is to figure out how in the Christian tradition do we get to this place where we recognize the absolute depth and importance and spiritual truth for ourselves and for others of hospitality. Of finding a way to overcome our fear of the stranger, and not saying that every experience of trying to care for strangers is going to be angels. I mean, that church had a very hardened experience, and I get it. They were part of the original the hospitality network for homeless, where people came and stayed in the church for a whole week.
All right.
And they fed everybody, and there was a woman in that church who was just the missionary of that thing. And she was so amazingly passionate. She got the church so involved in it, and one night she was murdered. She was killed by one of the homeless.
Oh, no.
Yes. They had taken in a woman and her child, and the husband. This is normally screened out. It's screened out much better now than it was back then. But the husband tried to force his way into the shelter to get to his wife, and she said no. So that church then, when we started trying to do other ministries of hospitality, I would have these good-hearted elders come to me and say, we can't take this risk. We can't do this.
It only takes one incident to
Yeah,
just
and they
destroy
were
it.
hardened to it. They closed out that church's involvement in that homelessness program, and it was tragic because it was a big church.
But that was just fear.
Yeah, they were like, that's, we can't take these
No.
foolish risks. But that's the risk. That is the risk. If we withdraw and we take ourselves out of the struggle of the poor, and yes, you have to make provisions for safety. You do.
But that's with the rich as well.
Uh-huh.
That
Just
is.
because they're poor doesn't mean that therefore they're dangerous.
That's
No,
right.
that's exactly
And that's
right.
what happens with people. They have that fear. And just like with the rituals, The rituals are fine, but are the rituals exclusive or inclusive? To me, is a very important thing.
I agree, Barbara.
That, only you can be part of this, is what, to me, is not what God is telling us to do. To have ritual is fine,
Yeah.
but it should be inclusive ritual.
And that's, and what, sometimes that word of trying to be inclusive, of trying to avoid the day of the Lord, can be overwhelming. Just overwhelming. At that same church that I was at, in order to get into the church, you walked down the sidewalk, and there was a very steep, I know it's probably 15 or 16 steps up to get into the sanctuary level. And there was a door around back, but there were two people in wheelchairs who really wanted to come and be a part of the church. And I said, we have to figure out how to deal with this. This is not their problem. This is our problem. And the response of the elders was, well, we'll be out there on the sidewalk. We'll pick up the wheelchairs and carry them up the steps. And they were like, what else do you want from us? We're making the building accessible. It's just like,
Not getting it.
I don't really think you're getting it. I don't think you're getting it. And in the Ewing Church, which was right near the School for the Deaf, big School for the Deaf in New Jersey, we had every meeting and every gathering of the church was signed.
It's wonderful.
But, how did we get there? We got there because one church family had a deaf child. And they were elders involved in the church, and they had pull and sway, and they said, you cannot exclude my child from this church. And everybody went, well, we're not excluding them.
You're not getting it.
Maybe
We're
he
just
should-
not making it
maybe he
easy.
should go to another church.
Where they have that.
But they did. They adopted it. It was part of the whole arrangement. And every meeting, every session meeting, every deacon's meeting, there was a signer there. And the worship service, I loved it because they would sign the hymns. And they would, I don't know if you've ever seen somebody sign a hymn.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's fabulous. And so we had quite a deaf community that ended up joining a non-hearing community, and they sat kind of all together.
There you go.
And what we then found out was the one signer who was coming got to know them. And she was communicating with them. In other words, she had created a communication among them, which those of us who were hearing knew nothing about. And I always said to her, I'm going to watch you. I don't want any side comments during my sermon, Like, oh boy, this was...
That's great. Well, I just wanted to say to you that, speaking with the visitors on Sunday, they were very, I'm saying what they told me, they were comfortable worshiping here, and they appreciated your very open mind and the message that you delivered, to the church that day. They were very encouraged by it, Pastor Lou, so.
Yeah, well, I was encouraged by their presence. And think what they're doing. They came, they parked their
They're
car,
so
and
brave.
they walk into this building, and they
So
didn't really know. They didn't know anything about the church. They could assume because we're a Presbyterian church, there might be more of an attitude of welcome or interfaith. But two of them together come in, and they are thrilled to find an interest from people like yourself and from the whole, it wasn't a large group, but it was from the group, and real excitement that they were here.
They were very happy to be here that
They
day,
invite you to Abraham's table again?
Yes, they
which
did.
is nice.
And actually, what they asked was that they'd like to be introduced to the Interfaith Network. They know of the rabbi at the synagogue here.
Right. And I've gone to a couple of interfaith things over there where they have been a presence, and we were all sitting together because we were the Muslims.
Right.
But there were Muslims from a lot of different organizations and masjids, and but they go to a lot of interfaith stuff because that's their mission.
That is their mission.
Yeah.
And they have big banquets, and they do, they do all kinds. In fact, I don't know if they still do it as much, but the government of Turkey, in the interest of understanding, would pay for.
Jack and, Jack went, and who else went? A couple others from this congregation.
They would pay for ministers and other people
They
to
all
go
went.
to Turkey.
Right, exactly.
They would take you to Turkey for 10 days.
Had a big
and-
trip to
Yeah,
Turkey.
yeah, I
Did-
think
did
Jane
Jack
Brady
went?
might have gone.
Oh, maybe Jane, yeah.
Did Jack go?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Jack and Janice.
Oh, all
And
right.
maybe, like you
I
said,
think it was Jane
and
Brady.
maybe
Okay.
a couple other people. But the idea, I think, in the end is dawa, which is evangelism.
Yeah.
But in the interim, you make friends, and there's no, it's not, I would say, I've had the knock on the door and the Jehovah's Witness come in. It's a whole different experience. It's so, there isn't that kind of pressure, like you're gonna die, you're gonna go to hell, please, listen to us now. I was in an inter-religious group for work years back with the homeless, and there was one lady who was an evangelical Christian, and she meant well. I know her. She was a lovely woman, but every day she would come in and she would say, "I pray for you every day." And if you do that, you already have put up a wall, and that's not the way. It's just not the way. Being hospitable, there's kind of no room for that. You can't damn somebody and then try and be nice to them, But I understood where she was coming from. But that's what this is leading to.
I
you know.
agree.
You got neighbors who are, the Middle East isn't that gigantic a place. You can travel a couple of days by chariot and be in another empire.
That's right.
So you better be nice to people because
You don't know what's going to happen.
You have no
Yeah.
idea.
If you're not nice.
And you said
But-
that the initiative of these Turkish Muslims is evangelism. And what I would say is, yes, and that is the beginning and the end of evangelism. Evangelism has had attached to it this judgment, this thing of, you're welcome to come in and sit down and eat my food, but now I'm going to have to fix you. Now I'm going to have to tell
Right.
you. And I've told this story before. In the flood that took place, we were partners with the Salvation Army, and there's two arms of the Salvation Army. One is a really very general relief organization that does tremendous work both in disaster and for homeless. But there are Salvation Army churches. And the Salvation Army churches are, let me tell you the story. So we had been working with the Salvation Army in the flood recovery, and we had created a warehouse of things. And the Salvation Army was so good in getting the things people needed to put their houses back together. And in the front of the warehouse, there was like an office building or a store. And we weren't really aware of it, but a pastor from a Salvation Army church came in and set up their worship services in the store in front of the warehouse. And then we got word from the flood victims on our list that they had closed the back door of the warehouse, and you had to come in and sit through a worship service where they talked about heaven and hell and all the rest of that. And if you sat through that worship service, then you got a little ticket, and that allowed you to go into the warehouse to get furniture.
Oh, my goodness.
that's when I worked for Interreligious Fellowship. I always had to, when I would recruit a church to house the homeless, I would have to emphasize, we do not proselytize. You can't make a meal and a bed a condition of having first to pray with you, to listen to a sermon or whatever
Right.
you've got in mind. And pretty much most of the churches and the synagogues were fine with that. But there were a few that were like, well, then we don't know if we can take on this mission. It is our mission to go out and spread the good news. And I'm like, you can do that if someone asks you. If someone says, tell me more about this, go for it. But you can't say, you can have food, but first, you just...
On condition.
it's not- I know, in the masjid, I used to when early on, they knew I had a Christian background. So whenever they would be, asking people to join different committees, always I got, can you join our committee? What committee is it? Well, we're doing Dawa, which is evangelism. As soon as I heard evangelism, I'm like, I'm out of here. I don't want to do it. And it was unfortunate because I ended up doing Dawa of a certain nature because after 9/11, I went to so many different churches and synagogues and gatherings and spoke. And that is Dawa. That's reaching out, to others to try and foster understanding and love,
Right.
not forcing people. So as a Christian, that's where I got that bad connotation of evangelism.
Yeah, and
It's unfortunate.
well, it makes, that's where they have that phrase, when the rubber hits the road, your faith has meaning as it makes contact with the earth. To me, in that understanding of evangelism is where the wheels come off the ground. Because you've now made the creed, you've made saying the right words for another person as the heart of what the gospel is. And, during the great liberalism of the 60s, that phrase went all over. I don't even know who originated it, but they said, preach the gospel, use words if necessary. And that was the heart of what was the challenges liberalism. Preach the gospel, use words only if necessary. And that is evangelism. That is now, and I serve churches where in the mission outreach they would say, well, tell us about this organization. We'll support this organization for the homeless, but do they talk about Jesus? Will they do that thing? And that is really bad taste about that experience with the church from the Salvation Army. And I went and met with that pastor, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "What I'm doing is I'm giving them the whole message of salvation." So then I went to the regional state director and said, "You can't let," and she went, "What? That's not." So then she went down and they closed the door between the warehouse and the church and stopped that from happening. But, there were lots of people who felt like, well, we're just wasting, our generosity if we're not attaching the message of Jesus, which is, give your heart to
Missing
Jesus.
out on that opportunity to save them.
Yeah,
We
for
understand.
them to be saved.
How is helping someone, though, ever a waste?
Never, Debbie.
And how is it not
How?
saving them? How is it
Exactly.
not preaching salvation? How is love not salvation? How is it ever?
Let the people see what you're doing, and they will ask, like, what does, Jesus says that, let them,
Yeah.
let them see and let them, then glorify your Father in heaven.
Yeah, if
And
people-
then they're gonna come to you and say, well, what makes you wanna do
Right,
that?
why
Or
are you
why
so
do you act
hospitable?
like that? Or, like, why are you so kind and generous? And there's your opportunity to say, because
That's what
Right.
I'm called
yes,
to do.
Christ has showed me that this is the way we're supposed to be one to another, right? I mean,
And even the Hebrew lesson was when people ask, when you do these great works of hospitality and kindness, and people ask, you should say this. My mother and father were wanderers. They were homeless. They wandered the earth without name and without home, and God gave them a name. God saved them. God made of them a people. How could I do otherwise?
Right.
And that's the witness that you get to give to God. That's it. And somewhere in there, the story of Jesus works. There's a way in which you can talk about the salvation that we've come to know in Jesus. But it's tricky, and you've got to be engaged in the work. The work itself, faith without works is dead. And so you've got to be engaged. And what is the work? The work is that which, the only thing that ultimately really, really makes God angry is for us as human beings to be the recipient of the sun rising and the air that we breathe and the soil which produces life and the generosity and the abundance of life, and then we turn around and we're stingy.
Yeah, yeah.
For that, God kinds of comments from the prophets say, you are, you cannot stand on a board which is extending out over a cliff and take a saw and cut the board off and not expect to fall into the cliff. You can't do that.
Unless you're in a cartoon.
Unless that's right. Unless you're a road runner.
That's right.
You know.
Beep, beep,
That's
all
right.
right.
And that to me is how this is being described. It's those two, that Muslim taxi driver that saved my life in Atlanta that night. And I said to him, I asked him that question, why are you so generous? Why did you pay my motel fee? Why did you pick me up off the street in the middle of the night? Why did you do that? And he described his gratitude to Allah, to his sense of God, and basically he said to me, it is impossible for me to not do these things. It's like, wow. Yeah, he didn't even say, oh yeah, I do it because I'm a good person, or
Yeah.
I do that because, no. It's, I cannot be otherwise because my eyes have been opened to the blessings that God has given me in my life.
So how do we get everyone's DNA to have that,
Yeah, I know.
including myself?
I know, including myself,
Well,
because
Yeah,
my
it's
eyes.
them,
To
but
remind
me.
us
It's
over and
almost
over.
impossible to be always mindful. And, there's just so many distractions, and there's just so many opportunities to be selfish. And we try and justify it. It just takes a lot of work every day to say, no, I got to remember what I'm called to do and not let life get in the way. But it's impossible to be always in the moment.
But I think if you can question and be mindful, it makes a big difference, because I remember someone asking me once, I said, I really don't know if there's an afterlife. And he said, well, why are you good then? Why,
Yeah, what good is
if
it?
there's no heaven,
right.
if there's, why are you doing the right thing? Or, like, what? Yeah,
Yeah, if there's no punishment or reward,
Right.
then why?
right.
Because.
Right, exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying. I have to keep reminding myself that, I think, to be mindful.
But isn't it a beautiful life that you have?
Amen.
Right?
Yeah.
But it also makes you feel good to do that.
Yes, it does.
Absolutely.
It's a,
It's
that's
a
the
life-changing
bonus.
experience to do good, to
Yes.
do, to
When-
assist others.
To do good is good for you too.
Absolutely,
Boy, it is. You're right.
absolutely.
And I think that see if I can, it's like one way is a slippery slope down towards our own destruction. And that is to be filled with a sense of what we don't have, of what we want, and all the things that we feel bad about that have happened in our lives. A slippery slope which builds on itself. It's like they say the problem with addiction is that it's a spiral, and the same amount of a chemical that made you feel better today, you'll have to use more of it tomorrow to feel as good as you did. And alcohol's like that. Whatever you drink today to feel that buzz, by the end of next week, you're going to have to drink twice that amount to get the same relief. And I think this whole idea of what is my life? And seeing scarcity, seeing what I don't have, always reminding myself of the wounds that others have brought to me, my failures and disappointments, it just keeps getting worse.
Right.
On the other side, moments,
Gratitude.
yeah, but moments of gratitude are moments that release you, even if momentarily, into an idea that, hey, I might not have much, but I have enough to do this for somebody else. That becomes a spiral in the opposite direction. It begins to build your sense of gratitude and then also, then you want to do more. You want to say, okay, that worked. That really is good. In my experience in working with people, trying to help them to grow in their spirituality, it's the first step that's the hardest. You know, all these years, we try to talk to congregations about the importance of giving so church can be generous in mission, and giving so the church can have programs and ministries that send the message and take the church out. And then, you have the stewardship campaign and people don't give any money. They don't give any money. And so you try to say to them, look, if you just would start, to be the kind of person who gives, don't give it to the church, give it to somebody else. But find it in your life to be able to give. And, I remember one conversation with a young couple, they had a new baby, and I sat in their living room to talk about it, and they both said to me, well, at the present time, we have no money to give. And I look around, and they're in their house, they've got their car, they've got their baby, the baby has all of it, and I think,
Don't get it?
and he said to me, we will be givers later on in our lives when we have more.
And you know that too. You know you're going to have more tomorrow.
Yes.
There's no guarantee.
There
of
is
that.
not, and it'll never feel like more.
Exactly.
It won't feel like more. So you will get more, you will have more, but you will still feel like you have less. And so the concern that has drawn you in on yourself will make you smaller, not bigger. This is why these illustrations are all around us, in terms of the states, the state in the United States that is, by percentage, the largest givers to charity and to the causes of the poor is Louisiana. And Louisiana is
It's
the
poor.
lowest income per capita in the United States, but the per capita giving from among the people is the highest. It's that, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. It's here, it's not just in the Bible, it's in every illustration of our daily lives.
Mark Twain said it too, Pastor Lou. He said, don't think for 1 minute that the rich take care of the poor take care of the poor.
That's right, that's exactly right.
Oh, right.
I love that.
before.
I love that.
Yeah,
He
the
says,
poor.
he has one quote, I won't say it now, but about the Jewish tradition. And it is so, you think, he was so smart, but kind.
Yeah, the poor take care of
I mean, it was like, he was sort of witty, it was like a dry, but what he said is true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
His truth was like overwhelmingly simple, and I loved it.
And this is the heart of the gospel. It is what we are to bear witness to, and the witness comes from, how does that happen in people's lives? Well, in order to avoid the haughtiness of, then we walk around and go, well, I'm a giver. There's nobody more humble than me. There's nobody more generous than me. In order to avoid that, we have to recognize that if even one inkling moves in us towards hospitality and generosity, it comes directly from the Spirit of God. It's just like in the other Bible study, we were talking about Cyrus. What happened in Cyrus's life? Well, the writers of Scripture say the Spirit of Yahweh stirred in him, stirred his heart, and as a result, the history of the world was changed. So it's not because of us, it's not because we're better, it's because we've been fortunate enough to have experiences that happen in our lives that, actually help us to release a little bit of our security by giving to others.
Or how about when, like on like you're saying, the stewardship campaign, when they say, well, give till it hurts. Well, that makes people real nervous. Dig a little deeper, you can actually almost feel in a group like that.
There was one campaign done by a campaign program that, that's like Christ is going to win your heart, give your heart to Jesus. I don't think it took on in many churches, but they changed it to give your wallet to Jesus. And
Wow.
They actually passed out these little gimmicks, you know, as part of the pledging thing, and it was a wallet, you know? And the script that was under it was that Jesus is not just looking to convert your heart, but Jesus is looking for the whole conversion, which includes your wallet. Yeah, oh, that was a little too close.
That always makes people uncomfortable.
Oh, my
I'll tell
goodness,
you.
yeah.
When I first became Muslim, I was astonished to, like, especially during Ramadan, they'll pray 4 rak'ah, different, motions through as they read Quran. Then they take a break. And during the break, especially the old imam of ICPC, he used to have this big booming voice, and I didn't understand a lot of Arabic at the time, but he's screaming at people. That's what But what he was doing was asking people to give and to give generously. This is the time you get the most reward during Ramadan, la 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 la. And people stand up and then, $1,000, $1,000 here. Dr. So-and-so, 1,000. And they actually invite the people to get up, stand up, and be recognized.
For the gifts
And
they just
that really made me uncomfortable, but I guess it didn't make folks because there were ladies, this was a while ago, and most of them were immigrants, so ladies came and they were very traditional, they didn't have jobs on the outside, but what they had was jewelry, and the ladies would give their jewelry and be recognized, and I'm like, do I sit just trying to...
Sit close to the woman who makes the
I don't
commitment.
got
They'll think it's you.
Right.
Yeah, I already did that.
I was just very uncomfortable with that. I guess coming from a Presbyterian tradition,
Oh,
number
yeah.
one, the frozen chosen, you don't want to,
like that.
stand up and,
Yeah, no, you never talk about that. You never, in fact,
it's kept kept
Yeah.
very quiet.
yeah, there was a code actually in that big Presbyterian church I served, and I call it the code because along with the note that went out for stewardship, there was always an asterisk at the bottom that said, no one, and then it repeated it, no one in the church will know, including the pastor, how much money you give except for the financial secretary. And the financial secretary was sworn to secrecy.
Secrecy.
And I felt like, what is the game we're playing? Like, what is the game? And so the terrible lesson for me was that everybody made up their own ideas about who the big givers were.
Oh, gee.
And so there was still a lot of catering to people. There still was a lot
And
of
that
like
probably
kissing
turned
up.
out to be-
Yeah, and this one woman in particular, I mean, she's dead, God rest her soul. But, oh my goodness, this lady knew how to cast about and to have people believe, that don't make me mad or I'm gonna stop giving to the church, and you already guessed where I'm going.
Right.
When she died, I said to the financial secretary, oh my goodness, how are we gonna survive?
Without.
And the financial secretary gave me a look. And she said,
Really,
you
right.
have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
There you
Because
go.
in fact, for years, she had given nothing.
Nothing. Wow.
Nothing. But she was raking in all the,
Accolades.
idea of, like, God, this life is too complicated. I
Amen.
cannot cope with this. I mean, I can't.
How about paying for your pew,
Oh, yeah. In some ways,
that
you know
was-
what? In some
Yeah.
ways, I think that was more fair.
Oh, really?
I do. I mean, I do.
You think it's okay that the rich people get to sit up
No,
front?
I think there ought to be an egalitarian way of saying, you know what? All pews are for sale,
You
but
too can
All
have.
right.
based on your income.
Oh, well, that's fair.
Or you could do what.
Based
Okay.
on your income, you
Based
can
on
have
your
the
income.
stool in the back.
Sure.
What my brother's church would do is you had to give your W-2 form, or you had to give your
Really?
Whoa.
you had to give your income tax return.
Well, the Catholic Church kind of demands a 10% tithe, don't they? Oh,
No.
didn't they?
I
used to?
never
Used to talk
saw,
about it.
I never saw bills being collected when I was in Catholic Church in Manhattan till I was 14. When they passed that basket, it was not until I came to a Protestant church that I ever saw a bill go in a basket.
Really?
Oh, yeah. People used to give it 10 cents a quarter, 50,
Or like
Maybe
my-
I was in a poor
In a poor parish, yeah.
but no.
I
no,
have one of my
no.
cousins,
Tithing-
we used to go
I
to-
never heard of tithing
No, I
until
think
I
tithing
came
was
here.
more
Is it
Protestant.
Protestant?
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do.
Well, there
Yeah.
are Catholic congregations that, like, there's one in Flemington, where you go in and a big banner across the back says that this is, was it Sacred Heart? This is a tithing congregation,
Okay.
and it's big,
Yeah, I
like,
thought
it's a
it
big
was. Wow.
sign,
Yeah, I've
and
never-
it's part of their identity, but
Yeah. I've never seen that. I know we got, well, just like most churches, like, because I was a practicing Catholic till I was married. And we always got our envelopes, and you did write down like what your intent, like what you would give, your
Right,
offering.
pledge.
Yeah,
Right,
thank
yeah,
you, a pledge
yeah.
for the year. And, but just so you know, each one of us, like I was from a family of 7 children and 2 parents, each one of us had our own envelopes.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big part
Yes.
of the early
Yeah.
training for
Yes,
children.
that's what it
I'll
was.
never forget my cousin, smart ass that he was. They had the basket in the Sunday school class, because we weren't up in the regular congregation. So they passed the little basket with the kids, and everybody's putting in their 25 cents, or, one day Donald puts in $1, and the next thing you know, he's rooting
Taking
around.
change.
He's taking
Taking
change. It's like, well,
Oh,
I didn't mean to.
And
Oh, my
his parents gave them the $1 to put in the
Yeah.
basket.
But he wanted to stop at the candy store.
Oh, that's great.
I had a friend who was a Monsignor in a fairly large parish, and he told me that he was fed up with the coins
Yeah.
in the collection. And he finally said at the beginning,
No
and
coins.
for a couple of weeks, he
No
said,
coins. Oh,
we're
dear.
gonna do this, receive an offering, and I don't want to hear a sound.
Yeah,
I
no
don't want to
rattling.
hear one sound
like
at all from the giving. So, and they all knew what it meant, but they probably meant they're not giving. Yeah, nothing is quiet too.
But I also think it's very easy to judge people. The first time that we did the Habitat build, they told me how much each person's donation was. And I was uncomfortable with it. And of course, I would say, gee, that person was really generous. And that person, is that all they gave? Because I know they have more.
Well, sure.
This time, I have no idea, and I feel,
That's-
sometimes I can figure it out if the jump's a lot and there's only one donor. But, I feel much better.
It's an invitation to be judgmental then.
Right,
Yeah, and that's
exactly. It's so-
uncomfortable.
Yeah, I get that.
How do we-
My
how do we
senior,
control
my senior
this?
pastor
I
in
don't know, we're
Ewing,
uncontrollable.
he made it clear that he knew everybody's giving. He was a Presbyterian, he was like, I know, I go in, I look at the books, I see. And here was his justification. He said, so when you go into the doctor, the first thing the doctor does is take your temperature. Your giving is your temperature. And he said,
Wow.
it was all a bunch of bull, because he would say, well, and if I see
Curious.
that you're not giving any money, then I'm gonna come visit you and find out what you're sick of. Well, that wasn't what was happening at all. It was a big smoke and mirrors way of saying,
I'm nosy.
I'm nosy and I'm gonna know. And I would have to say, I love this man. But he always believed he was above the judgment that came from knowing. He was not.
No.
He was not above it at all. He kowtowed to those he thought and knew would give, and he ignored the people who probably couldn't afford to give, but he ignored them because what he wanted was more money for the church.
But you don't know if those people are giving to something else.
That's right.
Or what, are they
That's right.
supporting 10 other relatives or?
You have no idea.
Right, exactly. So, it's better.
Pastor Lou, I know I've been
Thanks, Barbara.
saying, see you, Barbara, that I am naive about this kind of stuff, but I have always really honestly felt like if you put it out there, if you care even this much about your church, you put it out there that we have a need, like when we took on that building, like we said, we need to clean up this building, we need to do certain repairs and blah. I feel like people that.
They do.
If like it moves you to say, oh, this is necessary. I mean, we want to take care of our building. I mean, this is the, like this, what enables us to come here and share our faith.
Yeah, I think
I
that
don't
one of the
know.
problems that the church has, every church has, is, we work with the missions committee, and I've been, saying this, and I think it bears out, and that is, describe a need, and people will give to
Yep.
fill it. The problem is that, we went through this whole period also in fundraising in churches where I always felt like it was just a big guilt trip. And that is, somebody's got to pay the light bill.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's not a way to present
No,
it.
and it's like, well, if you don't give, then we'll have to turn the lights out. Or, who do you think pays for the heat? And all of that, I call it the non-sexy appeal, because
Yeah, it's
that's
not-
that's not like a special appeal. You can raise money for the roof is leaking. But what's hardest to raise is that regular rhythm,
Basic.
the regular rhythm of giving that just allows the church to exist. And, then the ministry or the mission of the church sometimes is not always in people's minds. Like, for example, we say, well, we give food to the food pantry, and that's great, that's helping. But it's harder to quantify, like, we have this technology which takes the message of the sermon and the church out into the community. But it's not easy for us to see how many people
It brings.
benefit from it
Right.
and celebrate its existence, so that the gifts also lead to that. It's hard. You can't always see the return from your gift.
Well, I think through COVID, I think it was a treasure for most of us. I mean, it was wonderful.
Yeah, people's giving was easier. It was easier to get it during COVID, and I think again that's
Wow.
because they had a sense of this is vital.
Yeah.
This is really vital.
Right.
You need to leave as well.
No, I'm waiting for Barbara to try to get out those outside doors
Oh.
with the walker. I'm just,
Yeah, I was thinking.
wait.
I was thinking, where was I that they had automatic doors on it? And I was thinking,
the hospital.
how expensive is that? Because that is
Library in
awesome.
Hawthorne has it. You hit the, like
You
if
hit
you're in
the
a
button.
wheelchair, you can
Right.
hit that little low button there. and-
Wonderful, the doors just.
Yeah, it's just great.
And-
I'm sure that's quite expensive.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I guess, although,
Yeah.
all technology is like coming.
Coming
down to our
around.
level.
Yeah.
No, she made a trip into the restroom before
Oh,
she was
okay.
going home, so I'm just waiting, because I know she'll want to get out the door without
Yeah.
falling down. but-
Well, maybe we've talked it out here.
Yeah, we kind of got off the Isaiah.
Well,
Well,
we did and we
but-
didn't, because
yeah.
again, I think the underlying message here is what we were talking about, and that is how easy it is to wander away
Right.
from the core of what is the message. I go back to people and say, oh, I don't read the Old Testament because, there's an angry God there, there's always
Yeah,
mad people. I go, well, read a little closer. This is a compassionate, loving, graceful God who is frustrated with us when we do not become compassionate, loving, hospitality-oriented people.
And it's the writers who are being honest.
They
Yeah.
are. They're like, this is,
It's not pie in the sky, everything's happy, yeah.
Yeah. And Isaiah is great because he keeps warning us, don't put your trust in people.
right.
And-
And
yeah.
examining your own life.
Yeah,
versus
look at
out
yourself, Take a good look around. I like, this has nothing exactly to do with Isaiah, but, somebody from church and I were talking, and it was politics, and he was saying to me what a awakening it was for him as a lifelong Republican. What happened on January 6th is what it took to open his eyes.
Right.
I find that incredible because I always feel people are, I find people quite savvy, Pastor Lou, I really do. And like when somebody says something like that, I'm like, oh. Like
what
you
happened?
didn't notice the
Right.
first time someone opened up their mouth and spoke hate? That, like, no, I sit and I say, oh, well, I thank you for sharing that, because I find that really interesting, and for someone like me, very heartening to know that you could see that for what it was, because this was quite a supporter of our ex-president.
Yeah, I feel like my pathway to navigate during this polemical time, where you can't even talk,
Right.
is to keep repeating, this is what I think of in my mind anyway. I don't care, Democrat, Republican, or independent. I don't care. But what I do care about is that whatever is proposed from any and all of the groups is proposals that they believe brings about care for the poor, care for the homeless, hospitality. So tell me your political program, and then show me how your political program leads to those things. And I think if we could keep our politics grounded more to that, you know, some would say, well, one party has always been doing that, but, you know, abuse is rampant in politics. It is.
Oh, it is.
And-
Politics in general, Pastor, like you're saying, not talking about party lines or anything.
Right. It's the nature of
Of who we are.
political power, because to keep power, you often have to make deals that
With the
would-
devil.
Yeah, you go in with idealism and high hopes, and then you find out that if I'm going to get anything done, I'm going to have to give way on, you have to compromise on your idealistic self. And if you can do that, that's great, then you're a good politician.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's
And I
hard.
think also the temptation among the populace is to believe that when all the promises and all the structure from whatever party don't lead to relief or don't lead to the things that we hope for, that then the next best thing is revolution, which is bring the system down. And you see that all over the world.
Yeah.
Over and
But
over.
the problem is, into the vacuum, I mean, here we are. We're going to see, here the system is brought down. The system comes down, but it comes down through the invasion of foreign enemies. And it's like we were reading last night. In the rebuilding, the
Already.
corruption is still there.
Yeah,
The-
that's
it's
right.
They're right at the foundation.
Feelings of anger and hatred are right there as they try to rebuild the city on the hill, Zion, which is the city which shines the light of God and God's grace, the love of all people as children of God, within 10 seconds. It's like,
They're
you know,
laying the foundation.
yeah.
And they
that's
can't
right.
even get
And what
past
is the
that. 2
foundation
years
gonna
they
be?
are.
You can come in and you can't.
That's right.
Terrible.
That's right.
That's why I love that Quranic, well, it's not from the Quran, it's from the traditions of Allah in paradise with Adam and Eve. And before he actually creates both of these creatures that he's intending to breathe life into, to send his ruh, his spirit into these, humans, the angels say, "What are you doing? You know these creatures are going to be nothing but trouble. Why are you doing it?" And he says, because Allah says, because I can, and that's my desire. I'm going to do this. Because the angels have no choice. They have to worship Allah. They do whatever Allah
Right.
wants them to do. But human beings, they know, have their own set of, their own ideas. They're going to be trouble. And sure enough, right from the beginning.
Absolutely.
And it reminds me of the conversation that takes place in the book of Revelation, where, I don't know, it's like there's a moment in all of the storytelling and everything where it says that basically God gets an idea. God has this amazing idea. And the angels learn about it. And the idea is the incarnation of Jesus, as I'm going to go down there and I am going to become one of them. And the angels, like what happens is, it says that after the idea is revealed, it's dead silent in heaven for 30 minutes. That's what it says. It says
Okay.
there is silence in heaven for 30 minutes. And at the upshot of the end of the silence, the angels say to God, "Are you out of your mind? You're going to go down?
There.
Do you remember
Those
who these people are? And there's this implication that, you know, the angels know, you go down there, they're gonna kill you. You go down there and make yourself vulnerable to them, they're gonna kill you. And God persists, and God says, no, it's the way of salvation. This is the only way we can redeem the brokenness, which is part of humanity.
I tried flood.
That's right. I've tried every other way. I've tried to deliver a message here and there.
Right.
I've sent my prophets. I've sent, you know, I'm going
Right.
myself.
Rasulullah, yeah.
Yeah, oh
and,
dear.
So
Doesn't work.
aren't you glad we all listened then to the
Yeah.
witness?
Right.
You know,
comes.
it's because we are flawed. I don't believe in like original sin. I'm Muslim. We don't believe that. But we believe that there's just a certain amount of flaw in every human being. And part of the adventure of life is to try to overcome that.
Yep.
And so, you know, what is perfection? I don't think you ever achieve perfection,
No.
but the adventure is in the trying. And
And the words I prefer in translating into our contemporary is broken. We are broken. Every relationship is broken. And the journey is from brokenness toward wholeness. So that wholeness sees the restoration of ourselves, the restoration of our relationships. To me, it pulls it out of that language of sin and sacrifice and all that.
yeah.
It doesn't really describe what really is happening. A child born is not a child who is full of sin. I don't care what John Calvin said. A child is not born full of sin, but a child, a human being, has in their life and will in their life experience everything that is broken about being a human being. They will.
Right.
They will respond in revenge. They will experience life and be in life what human beings have been. We are broken. And that brokenness, to me, that word expresses so much better because it's neutral in terms of sin feels like it has a, who sinned. But when you say we are broken, and you talk about brokenness, it's more of a descriptor of a condition of us.
It's very Hebraic. I mean, the Hebrews believe in tikkun olam, the reparation of the world.
That's right.
What all the mitzvah is about. They realize that the world itself, as a whole, is broken. We have, cut some of our communion with God, and now we need to repair that.
Repairing it. There's a phrase, I think, from Isaiah that says, you shall be called the repairers of the breach.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that whole idea. And I think,
Yeah, I love that.
more I learn about all these three religions, and I don't know anything about the other religions
Right,
of the
right.
world, but I'm sure they all have things in common. But these three religions especially have so much in common.
So much.
We're cousins. I mean,
Yes.
so the rituals are different. So there's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But the core values are the same. So it's so easy to walk in, maybe not for everybody, but for those ladies who understand that there's such commonality, to walk in and be able to sit
Yeah.
and then have the good experience of a congregation that feels the same way
Right.
is great.
Right.
It was wonderful.
We trust in that common bond, and that allows it to be strengthened.
Right.
Well, thank you for being here today.
Thank
you
you.
for those who have joined or will join us online. I hope, check the microphones to see if they lasted. Yes,
Whoa.
the microphone lasted for the whole time. Now, if only it picked up our talking, that's good. Sister Colette, it's nice to see you today.
Bye, Colette. See you next time. Bye.
We'll see you again. Thanks for joining in today.
One of my kids sent me something, like we were talking
All
about
right, I'm going to
hospitality.
sign this off.
And this was about something that some congresswoman had said, like terrible stuff. Jimmy Kimmel kind of made a comment all about
I
it.
liked it.
Did you see it?
No.
Well, she was saying like, it's so bad, like these immigrants are coming and they're replacing us or something.
Oh, that.
And so Jimmy Kimmel said, oh yeah, what are we replacing? Are we replacing hate